Yes,
There we are.
fantastic.
Sorry. I tried the phone, the iPad, and then this. Okay, cool.
Cool, looking fantastic. All right. So, what I thought I'd do is we'd record the Skype call, and then then I can just convert it into a video and have it available for people on our membership site. So,
Okay.
yeah. So just before we get started into it, I noticed that the Haute Route's just created a stack load of events. They've got Pyrenees, Alps, Utah, Dolomites, Ventoux, Omar,
Yeah. So what?
San
What?
Francisco. Yeah.
I'll give you a bit of a history, just for you right now. So they started with a 7-day event in the Alps. So they went. It was the one that went from Geneva to Nice, and
Okay.
then the following year they put in the Pyrenees. That was the year I did it. I think it was 2014 was the first year I did it, and then the
Okay.
following year they added the Dolomites. So for that third year they had three 7-day events. And then what they started doing was adding 3-day events on some of the really classic climbs, like Alpe d'Huez was the first 3-day event they did. And then they started branching out, and they did a 7-day event over in the States.
Okay. Yep.
And I think what they found was because of the cost and basically how hard it is, the 3-day events became very popular. So they then took the Dolomites away from a 7-day event, made it a 3-day event just in the Dolomites, because it used to be Geneva to Venice. And the other problem they had was accommodation. And so the 3-day events have become very popular. But I think the 7-day events are still I guess, the queen events, if you like.
Yeah, the iconic events. Yep.
The iconic events, yeah. So the 3-day events are now the Pyrenees, the Alps, the French Alps, and the Rockies.
Yeah, I've just seen that they've actually got it a little bit more organised on their website now, because I remember going back onto there a few, maybe it would have been a couple of months ago, and it was like all a bit confusing. So I noticed that they've got the 3-day events as a separate page. They've got all the events, 3-day events, and then the 7-day events. So, but the queen events are they've got the Pyrenees and the Alps, and for the 7-day events they've
Rockies.
got Pyrenees, Alps, and the Rockies. And
That's right.
you've done the
Pyrenees, the Alps, and the Dolomites.
Dolomites, but the Dolomites have converted into a 3-day event. Is that right?
Yeah, which is good actually because there were a lot of long valley traverses in Switzerland, and the other thing is it's a cyclosportif, so it's timed. The downhills aren't timed, which really gives me the shits. But
Yeah.
the the Swiss wouldn't allow them to time the flat events, so I think Switzerland
Right.
was just logistically problematic for them. And so, and Geneva as well. So they've pulled out of Geneva. It starts this year in Megève. The
Okay.
other thing they've done that's really good is you tend to spend 2 days now in a lot of the event villages. It used to be just one day in each village, and it was a bit of a logistical pain. But now they're doing loops, and you actually spend 2 days in a couple of villages. So it's really a lot better.
Right. Fantastic. Awesome. All right. So, well, let's run through your sort of history of the rides, and your sort of story around your Haute Route journey, going going back to when you first started, and
Yeah,
and the format and how it's changed.
yeah. So, well, I'll go beyond before the Haute Route. So I started road riding in 2011. I was a
Yeah.
mountain biker up until that point, and a friend of mine said we should go do this Three Peaks Challenge in Victoria. And so, so we did that in 2000. I actually did it in 2011, and I'd only
Right.
been riding a road bike for about 6 months, and it was beyond anything I'd ever done before in my life. I think I finished in 13 hours with my wife crying on the finish line because she thought I was lost. The sun was setting, it was raining. But I ended up doing 2 more of those, and then the guy who invited me to do that with him from Perth, he decided we should have a crack at this Haute Route.
Yep.
So I thought, well, I can do the Three Peaks, I can do the Haute Route.
Of course.
So we ended up doing the Pyrenees in 2013. It was
Yep.
actually, and then it was really difficult. And I had a coach here named Peter Trench who helped me, and we put a bit of a plan together. It wasn't as sophisticated as what we're doing now with the power meters and everything,
Yep.
but it was an eating plan. That one was difficult. We did one day. We did Pirasord, Azet, Aspen, and Tourmaline in one day. So in 98 kilometers, we climbed 4,000 meters.
Yeah. Sounds like here in Mansfield, you know.
It's just an odd. And then, I finished that, so I was pretty happy with it. But I thought I'd got to get more regimented about cycling and training and stuff. Yeah. The following year, we did the Alps, so that was the one from Geneva to Nice. Yep. So I was a bit more prepared for that, but I was still struggling with eating on the bike over the long period that the days were. And then I took a year off, and then in 2016 we did the ride that went from Geneva to Venice, and I really nailed that one. That was the one where I brought you on as a coach. Now, day one, I didn't listen to the coach, so and we know what happened. We phoned you and we modified our plan, but when I did listen to my coach, I had a blinder. So the first day was devastating because I went too hard too early. Last 6 days went really well.
Yep.
What's interesting about the Haute Route is you get about 300 people, give or take, on each of the rides. The first 100 people are professional athletes. So these are guys that are not tour riders, but guys who are in development squads. There'll be people who are athletes, triathletes, some professional rugby players, Emma Pooley, people like that are in that sort of 100 group, and they're off first, and they're racing, right? The next 100 are people who are sort of professional athletes, but have to work to support their habit.
Sure.
And then I call the third 1/3 is the numpties like me, or professionals in another part of life and love riding, right? But still like doing things like Three Peaks and the Odd X and things like that.
Sure.
And my goal was to finish in the at least the top of that last 100 and into the second 100. And leaving aside the first day, I did really well. In fact, I finished right in the middle on day 7. And that was the one that taught me the plan that you needed to have to do a Haute Route. Yep. So it had taken me 3 of them to actually get everything together: training, feeding, and the discipline you need for recovery. So that's the one I think we can really draw on for this discussion.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. Let's talk about that then. Yep.
So when I was thinking about, when you and I talked about doing this, I was thinking about what the thread needed to be, what the common thread needed to be for the discussion, and it ended up being discipline. Yeah. So a lot of people, hearing this will be people you're training. They'll have a training program. They'll be disciplined about their training. They'll be disciplined about their diet, I hope. But on the day, this is like 3 back-to-back Three Peaks.
Yeah.
The day of a Three Peaks is harder than any single day on the Haute Route. It's a longer day, and you're doing a lot of climbing.
Sure.
But on the Haute Route, you're doing 7 days. You do get a rest day, which is a time trial, but it's a time trial up Ottacam or Tourmaline or something like that. So it's it's a rest day. The thing that I find that breaks down is your discipline. So on a given day, you're getting up early and having breakfast. You've got to make sure that you eat, and that sounds like a given, but you might have had a bad night's rest, or you might be nervous, so you might not eat properly. On the bike, you're on the bike for long days, and there are fueling stops during the day, and they have gotten a lot better with it. There'll be Coke, there'll be oranges, there'll be bananas, there'll be power bars. But what I tended to do was I had the food that I eat, which are Cliff Bars and Cliff Blocks, and I know they work. And then I'll have a couple of oatmeal cookies for later in the day as a treat.
Sure.
But I have a very disciplined way now of stopping at each of those stops. So I stop for 5 minutes. I have a Coke, a water, an orange, a banana, and then I get on again and go.
Yep.
And the temptation is that you stop and have a chat with people, and you have a look at the sites, you take pictures. But I found if you stay more than 5 minutes, you get into that problem where you've got to get your legs going again. I just found stopping quickly, doing the food, doing a routine, was really good. The other discipline on the bike, as we talked about, was having that plan on if you're using a power meter or your heart rate, sticking to the coach's instructions. Particularly the first 2 days, it will seem very easy. So in my case, you had asked me to stay on 180 watts. On day 1, a group went past So I got onto the end of them. I was doing 240 watts, which was, I blew myself up, and the last 2 hours was just very difficult.
Yeah.
So it's about the discipline on the day, but also discipline on eating, because as you get down to 5-6 hours, your stomach's not feeling good. You're feeling pretty bad, but it's really being disciplined about eating. And I think when people are training, they really need to train themselves. They need to go on those long back-to-back rides to find out what still works for them in energy after 5 or 6 hours on the bike. And some people won't have experienced that. And, as you know, hitting the wall is just the worst thing. So it's really important to keep the fuel going and find out what works. And, you say time and time again, don't try something new on the day of an event.
Yeah.
And there's nothing truer than for this one. Right, you really have to stick with what you know, and that's I've got a routine about when I have my cliff blocks, top of the hour, bottom of the hour, and I do it religiously, and everything works. So, I've got that down pat. You come in from the ride, and then you'll come into an event village, and there'll be massages, shower massage. It's only a 20-minute massage, but it makes an enormous difference.
Yeah.
There'll be food there, so there'll be local volunteers doing pasta, rice, lots of carbs. And also having a recovery drink. So what I do is I just use the milk that comes in the UHT packages and Sustagen. Everybody will have their own recovery drink, and again, it's the one that works for you. Yeah. And it's really important, I think, that you do that first. So you've come in, you park your bike, you got that, everyone says you've got an hour to replenish your carbs, but really there's that 20-minute window where those enzymes are just going, I'm just going to put these carbs straight into glycogen, straight into your muscles.
Yeah.
And so that's a really good routine. And again, you've got to have one that you can stomach after being on the bike for 6 hours. Yeah. And what works for me is Sustagen. What works for you might be something else. Yeah. But whatever works, do it. And it's really important. And again, it comes to discipline, because you're going to be absolutely fatigued. Some guys are in tears when they cross the line, and girls. And so you're going to be tempted to just lie down and do nothing. But I think it's really important to get that discipline going. And if you stretch when you get off the bike, you got to be disciplined about doing it. And what's going to happen is you're going to be so physically and emotionally spent that the discipline will break down. Yeah. And I think these big long rides, they really are mental. They really are. And I think you've got to just have that discipline to do the same thing every night. About the recovery. And then you'll have your shower, you'll have your massage, you'll go back to your accommodation. Your bike might be some work. There's some really good support on the bike. So Mavic will have vans there. Yep. There's a bike shop that'll have vans there. They'll fix your bike. I was having problems with my derailleur. They fixed it last year. There's support on the road. So Mavic will have a couple of cars on the road that'll actually they'll have spare tires, spare bikes, just like a tour. You've got to be pretty well self-supported and have the chain breaker and all that stuff. But if things do really go pear-shaped, then Mavic will be there. So you tinker with your bike, you go back. If you can get a rest in, you get a rest in, even 10 minutes just lying on the bed. Then you'll go have dinner somewhere with, say you're riding with people, you'll go have dinner somewhere. Obviously you're going to have a high-carb protein dinner, and then get to bed and get up and do it all again. Yep. So that's a regular day. Again, it's just about discipline and doing the same thing day in, day out for 7 days.
Yeah, fantastic. And you've never ridden them back to back. You've never done the 3 events back to back, have you?
No, that's called the Iron Riders. Mainly, I worked full time. I would have liked to have done it. I would have liked to have tried 2. I think I could have done 2. 3 it's hard work. Yeah. 3 weeks, and you're basically doing 3 mountain weeks of a tour. You're actually doing more. If you did three of them back to back, you would be doing a tour and then some. But I don't think you can do 3 back to back anymore, because they've moved the 7-day event to the Rockies.
Yeah, they have.
Yeah. So I think the logistics were just getting tough. But I'll tell you that the 1 7-day event is an achievement. It really is.
Yeah. And I've certainly coached quite a few people for it, and they all come back saying that it's an epic event. So, no, fantastic. So tell me a little bit about logistics about getting there, and registering and qualification, and what sort of process is involved to actually, before you even start training for the event, what sort of preparation do you need to do, travel arrangements and those sort of things.
Yep. So you need when you register for the event, you have to get a medical. So your doctor has to say you're fit to do the event. There isn't any sort of official or what I would call rigorous like what rides you've done beforehand, but there is in the application it does says what rides have you done. So obviously you've done the Three Peaks and the Audax and all that stuff. Yeah. The registration process is very good. You pick there's different levels of accommodation that you can do. We just picked ones that are, honestly, what they do with accommodation, it's actually quite clever. Every accommodation in a village will have a rating, and it'll be from 5-star to 1-star. Yep. And everybody will have the same rating by the end of the week. So sometimes you'll stay in a 5-star, sometimes you'll stay in a 1-star. Okay. Sometimes you're close to the village, sometimes you actually have to be transported to the village. Now, there is an option where you can pay a little bit more money and get better accommodation. It costs a bit, but to me, I think it's worth it. But the accommodation's fine. We've stayed in great places at the top of Alpe d'Huez, and then we've stayed in these sort of places 10 kilometers from the race village where all we had in the morning was breadsticks for breakfast. So, okay. There's different accommodation. When you get there, you want to get there a couple of days at least before the event to get over jet lag, to make sure your bike is working. If you've got a problem during transport, then you want to get it fixed. And then on the day of registration, there's a process. You're corralled through a queue. They check your bike, they check your helmet. There's minimum requirements that you need. You then get your race pack, your race book. If you've ordered shirts and shorts, you get all those. It really works really well. It's very efficient. What they'll do, I think with the Pyrenees, because we start in Pau and we finish in Pau, what they'll do is they'll actually give you luggage. So they have standardized their luggage, and the reason they've done that is so that they know exactly how many bags will fit in their truck. So if everybody has different luggage, it's too difficult. So they give you a bag. It's a 90-liter wheeled duffel bag. Right. Okay. It's enormous, right? You can fit a Samsonite suitcase inside it. Yeah. Okay. And your bike bag and your bike box, depending on the event, say the Alps, will be shipped from Megève to Nice. So when you get to Nice, everything will be waiting for you in your hotel. Yeah. Your bike bag, you'll get a day pack. So the day pack you bring with you on the day. So you when you're moving hotels, you pack everything up. You'll go down to the lobby. Tomorrow's hotel will be printed on your bag. There'll be a sign that says, this hotel, put your bag here. So you leave your bag in the lobby, and then it gets moved to your next hotel. Right. Your day bag you bring with you to the start line. It'll then be taken to the finish line. So when you get to the finish line, your day bag, not your overnight bag, but your day bag will be there. So you might have your compression pants, you might have a pair of flip-flops, thongs, jandals, whatever you call them. Yeah. You'll have your energy drink, and you might have some food, whatever you want to have, at the end of the bag, at the finish line. So that's great as well. And your luggage will be moved. Sometimes it'll be in your room, sometimes it won't. Bicycle storage has a checkered history. Sometimes you can keep the bike in your room, which I prefer. Sometimes I prefer that you don't take the bikes in the rooms. They might be stored in, say, a ski lock-up room. Yep. There have been thefts. So do you bring an extra lock? Well, it's really personal. You can, because you've got the luggage that you can bring it. So I'd suggest bringing it, because if somebody goes in and they're stealing bikes and it's locked, then they'll go to the next one. Yep. But I think they've beefed up security. But certainly the year we did it in the Alps, 8 bicycles got flogged. Wow. Yeah, so that's something to think about. Maybe take your front tire up or something like that. But it's a very small risk, but it's a risk nonetheless. And then, what else?
Equipment and clothing. What sort of weather are you going to experience? What sort of equipment? Yeah. Yeah.
So on the Alps ride, we were in Courchevel and it was raining and it was 6 degrees. Mm-hmm. And on the top of Madeleine, it was about 2 degrees windy, and I got pulled off the course. I actually had to finish that day early because I had hypothermia.
Yeah.
So you can get conditions from 2 degrees in horizontal rain to 30 degrees and sunny. And for example, when we climbed Stelvio, in the valley it was really quite warm, but by the time you got to the top of Stelvio, you wanted arm warmers and the gilet on. So I would spend the money on getting high quality cycling specific wet weather gear. So I've done that. That's another lesson I've learned over 3 years. I've tried to go with, I've got jackets that are multi-use and fleeces, but they didn't work. And so, you got to carry it all yourself. Now, Haute Route does have a service that you can pay extra for, where you can have a second bag, like a bag
Valet
that you carry,
bag. Yeah.
a valet bag. Yeah, exactly. And it would be somewhere along the route. So if you know the weather's going to change, or the weather's going to be crappy, you can actually change. You can change your wet weather gear. So look, I've ridden with guys who do the entire day wearing nothing but their jersey and their shorts and one water bottle. They're just machines. They're superhuman cyborgs. And then there's other people who just need lots of food, lots of water, and want to change their clothes. So it depends on what kind of rider you are, but that option is available, and I'll probably end up doing it this year as well.
Yeah. All right. And equipment, bikes, gearing, tires,
gearing. Yeah. Gearing's a good one. So I remember doing the first 3 peaks, and I just didn't have, I wasn't compact enough. And I remember seeing Michael Rogers climb Zoncolan, and they actually did a close-up of his rear cassette and his rear derailleur, and it was an Ultegra, and he had a 32 on it. And I thought, if he can do it, I can do it, right? Okay, he was going up Zoncolan, but so I do ride compact with 32 chainring. So I've got Ultegra DI now. So I can run that with a long cage. So I'd strongly suggest having that, because you might be a machine, your FTP might be over 300, but you're not going to hold 300 for 8 hours, right? And you're going to be doing climbs at the end of the day. They're going to be hard. You're going to wish you had another. You're going to do what we call grab a granny, and she ain't going to be there, right? So it's just better to have that extra cadence. They don't time the downhills, and when you're on, I'll come to another interesting point. So they don't time the downhills, so you're not going to run out of gears, right? Yeah. The downhills are not timed for safety, so they just don't want people, doing a Richie Port, right? I mean, despite that, I still like going fast. But the other thing that's interesting is that as the days wear on, you'll find yourself around the same group of 20 or 30 people, because you're all the same caliber rider, and you'll start to form pelotons on the flats when you're in the valleys and the faults flats, and you'll end up doing chain gangs, and it's a mixed blessing, because you're in with a bunch of guys that you're sheltering yourself and taking your pull on the front, but you don't know how they ride. Now, most people ride pretty well, but you do see the odd accident, so just be aware of that. But you will form sort of friendships of people that you haven't met before that you're riding with every day. So that's quite good. And if you can get into a group, it's obviously worth doing. You don't want to be punching out all those Ks by yourself in a flat section or a faults flat. So that's really interesting. And I've found that strategically, you do want to make sure that you don't want to burn yourself out. If you're in a group of guys that are too fast, then you really need to drop off and wait for the next group. But I've found that certainly on the ride we did from Geneva to Venice, that every day we were in the same group of guys and worked together really well. You fall apart on the climbs, obviously, because everybody's got a different climbing capacity.
Yeah, understand. Yep, fantastic. And tyre choice, just go with racing tyres, or you want to go something more robust?
I've done. So I had a bike the first year I did it. My lovely wife bought me a lovely Specialized Venge, and it had 23s on it. And then that was just too hard. So I'll either run 28s or 25s. The 28s are hard to get past the brake blocks, but the only time you take the bike off and on, there's no air in the tire. So I'll probably either run 25s or 28s at about 90 psi. We know now that tire pressure and tire width isn't as big a deal as we used to think, but you want to be comfortable. I still run a pretty aggressive geometry. That's just the way I ride. So, you got to think about that. But I think if your body's used to a particular geometry, you probably want to stick with it. I would think when you're training, one thing I did do, and I'm really glad I did, was I did a lot of training, long rides on the drops. And the reason I did that is just because when you do get isolated, you really want to be aero. You want to really maintain really want to maintain an aero tuck if you're riding by yourself. On the uphills, I used to have a really good habit. What I would do is I would do 10 breaths on the drops, 10 on the tops, 10 on the hoods, and then I'd basically stand for 10 just to stretch the legs out, have a drink, and do it all again. And that just made, I mean, you're on some of these hills for an hour, so it just kind of made, it sort of broke it down, and that's the best way to climb a hill. Certainly, I think you don't want to muck around with your geometry too close to the event. You want to get your geometry right. I would be doing a lot of core work right now and leading up to the event. Yoga, just make sure you've got really good flexibility, particularly in your hammies. Your core is going to do a lot of work. Your back will get really sore if you've got a weak core, as you know. So if you do core work, step it up. If you don't do core work, do it. And then, of course, in your back pocket, you want to have some anti-inflammatories and some Panadol, just because, the third ride, by the time I did the third ride, because I'd found this fantastic book called Yoga for Cyclists, and I started doing some of the yoga stuff that's in it, and I've got a routine that I do now. And on the ride from Geneva to Venice, I didn't use any anti-inflammatories and any painkillers.
Fantastic.
So, so just that, and it really is static stretching rather than spiritual yoga. So it's really aimed at cyclists. My wife joked that if there was a book called Kale for Cyclists, I'd eat kale, but I said, that's true, but you're not going to find one.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, I think you've covered off most of the stuff. Is there anything else that you'd want to add to anybody doing the event? I remember a couple of years in a row I rode with a guy who was a journalist. He wrote for Bicycle Magazine in Great Britain. And in one of his articles, he just covered the Tour, and then he did the Haute Route. And he said it was like jumping over the fence. And it really is. It has a real tour atmosphere to it. So there's a start gate. There's over 100 support staff out on the road. So there's medicos, there's marshals. The roads are marshaled, which is a really good part of it. So you're not stopping for yield signs, stop signs, give way signs. They actually have marshals stopping the traffic. If you do get on major roads, there is a police escort. So it's very professional. The roads aren't closed, but they are marshaled. And so it's as close to a tour feel that you can get. When you do the time trial, you're leaving a ramp. There's a guy counting down. It really is like being on a tour. You finish at a finish line. The guys who are going up the front, there's people cheering. By the time I got there, they'd all gone home, and the pigeons were in the square. But it really does have a great atmosphere. It's one of the. I mean, I keep going back for more because I love it. So I'm doing the Pyrenees. This will be my fourth one. You're very safe on the event, so like the first time you do it, you're unsure about what goes on, but every day, everything just happens. It's really well organized. It's really important to go. This is something a lot of people skip, but every evening they'll have I forgot about this in the early part, but every evening they have a day's wrap up with a bit of video, and then they'll talk about tomorrow's day. What the hazards are going to be, the big climbs. So that part of it's really good. But out on the road, you're never alone. There's always guys, motorcycles, Mavic, the cars, guys filming. And in the event village, there's lots of places you can buy extra food and clothing and things like that. So it's just a moving, rolling carnival. Wow, fantastic. Mike, it's been absolutely awesome and very insightful on the day in the life of a Haute Route rider, so it's been fantastic. So I really appreciate you taking the time out. I know you're a very busy person, talking to us.
Oh no, because I as you know, I broke my collarbone, so I'm only working.
Of course. I know. So anyway, that's the way things happen. But that's been fantastic. All right. Well, what we'll do. What I'll do is I'll hang up this call and then I'll reconnect with you and then we'll talk a little bit about how you're going with your training and then we'll finish up tonight if that's okay. Yeah? Fantastic.
All right, let me just show you something first.
Yep.
That's my collarbone.
Oh, boy. Mate. And they didn't want to plate it?
No, they didn't.
Really?
So that'll grow a big knot of calcium, and then what'll happen is the old bone will disappear and the new bone will grow where the old bone was.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh, well.
isn't that amazing? Yeah.
So
Okay. Have you got my training peak stuff up?
I can bring it up. It takes me like
All right.
3 seconds.
Cool.
So I'll hang up this call and then I'll call you back. All right.
All right, mate. Thanks. No worries.
Fantastic. Catch ya.